I'm also going to start the recording. There we go. It's done. Do I still have people joining? We won't be long before we get started. First of all, I hope everyone is doing well and that your week is off to a good start. All right, it's 11:31. Let's get started. Hello and welcome everyone to this new webinar. We're delighted to have you with us today. As we do every Tuesday, we're hosting a series of webinars. I don't know if you've seen the previous two, which focused on student-led assessment use cases and best practices when creating a student assessment. And today we're going to really focus on a specific type of assessment, which is peer evaluation within a group. I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Florent and I'm a coach at Challenge Me. Challenge Me is an assessment and feedback platform used in most business schools in France, as well as universities and other schools in France, Switzerland, Belgium, and also a bit in Canada. We are integrated with these schools' tools such as Moodle, Blackboard, and Brightspace to make the platform easier to use and to facilitate access for both students and teachers. Let's get straight to the heart of the matter and talk about peer evaluation within groups. Just a quick reminder, I mentioned the two previous webinars. We provide replays. Gene, who is also a coach at Challenge Me, is here with us.
Hello.
I'll let him say a quick hello. He can also share the links to the two previous webinars in the chat, so you'll have them. I'll let him post those links directly in the chat so you can access them if needed. As I was saying, today we're really going to focus on evaluating group members. First, I'll give a brief definition of group member evaluation. I think it's clear for most people here, but you never know. Evaluating group members is also called intra-group evaluation. Intra-group is a term we kind of created at Challenge Me a few years ago when we launched this type of evaluation on our platform. It was quite well received by teachers, educational teams, and so on. Now, it's a term that's often used, and some schools even refer to intra-group for evaluating group members and intergroup or for evaluating assignments. These are really two distinct types of evaluation. By the way, the next webinar next week will be about assignment evaluation. I encourage you to sign up for the next webinar as well. Let me get back to evaluating group members. As I was saying, this is an evaluation method that can be either formative or summative, in which students assign a grade or feedback to each member of their group based on criteria that you, as the teacher or teaching team, can define. In this webinar, we will quickly go over the fundamentals of intra-group evaluation. What is intra-group evaluation? I've already started giving the definition. We'll take a look at some of the benefits and the skills developed through this type of evaluation. We'll see how to set up an intra-group evaluation. So the key steps to properly configure this type of assessment. After that, we'll take a quick tour of the platform to get a sense of the Challenge Me user experience, how the interfaces look for users as well as for teachers. And we'll finish with a short Q&A session for anyone who has questions. As a bonus, right at the end of the webinar, I invite you to stay if you have time. I'm not really sure. The webinar should last about 20-25 minutes, 30 minutes at most. But if you'd like to stay, I'll give a brief presentation of the new challenge creation interfaces. At that point, I'll go directly onto the Challenge Me platform and show you in a hands-on way how to create a challenge to assess the members of your group on our platform. And on top of that, it will give you a chance to do these new interfaces that will be rolling out in a few weeks, which will be available at the start of the new term. This part will be more of a workshop style presentation for the bonus session. Why use group member evaluation? There are several objectives which can be shared or simply straightforward, such as the most common one, reducing the phenomenon of free riders, the so-called free riders. but it can also be used to make students more accountable in teamwork, to develop critical thinking and soft skills. And another common use, IPAN, is to achieve a fairer assessment of individual ladies' contributions. That means we can individualize the grade for a group project. These can be objectives, and by setting common goals, you can almost evaluate group members for all 4 objectives at the same time. You can choose the type of objective you want and build an intra-group evaluation around that objective. Let's take a look at some of the benefits and the skills that are developed. We're going to find some fairly typical aspects with this type of evaluation. In particular, it really makes students more responsible because they'll be aware that they're going to evaluate the members of their group. So they'll hold each other accountable for the task to be completed and so on. This will inevitably help them develop their soft skills because they'll have to, soft skills are behavioral skills. They will have to analyze, critique, give feedback to their peers, and also, and this is quite important, in a group member evaluation, provide a self-assessment. So on the Challenge Me platform, we always require a self-assessment whenever we ask students to evaluate the members of their group. This self-assessment is optional, but we really recommend and advise you to highlight it for your students, knowing that it obviously does not count towards the final grade. The grade the student receives will be solely the one given by their peers, and the self-assessment will not be taken into account. But it's a very important aspect to implement because it allows students to do a bit of self-reflection and so on. As I was saying, it will also allow for a fairer assessment. So it will make it possible to individualize a group grade directly. Generally, for example, if a group project is submitted, you might imagine that the grade is split, 70% for the group work and 30% for the individual grade. This is something that is increasingly being requested even by students themselves, so that they actually feel that their contribution within the group has really had an impact on their final grade. And for those in their group who may have worked less, they will get a lower grade than the others. That's it. It's something that surprisingly is increasingly, well, surprisingly in quotes, but is more and more requested for by students. It will also help improve communication, so communication within the group. You'll see there are some really specific use cases. I'll talk about them later when I cover the key steps in creating the challenge. But we can imagine doing evaluations over time, actually, evaluations of group members over time. That is, let's say we have a project where students are working on something that takes 1 or 2 months, and we can imagine several evaluations at key stages. At the beginning of the evaluation, at the start of the project, in the middle of the project, and at the end of the project. And that way we can check whether the group has made good progress, whether it has evolved in the right direction. Maybe the group had some difficulties at the start, and being able to give each other feedback, to discuss and so on. Based on criteria that will have been defined, this will allow for improvement, for adjusting the group's dynamics so that by the end of the project, you end up with a highly functional group, which will certainly, as a result, produce work of much higher quality. So this will also help improve communication because if we don't do this work of evaluating group members, maybe each person in the group will just keep to themselves, perhaps brooding a bit over work that wasn't done by a teammate and so on. And so this provides a platform where you can express yourself directly and give advice to your teammates. So that's for the educational benefits. As for the skills developed, which naturally go hand in hand with these benefits. So we're really talking about soft skills here: communication, critical thinking, collective intelligence, as I mentioned, self-assessment, which is something we're not used to working on as students. We rarely evaluate our own work. We will let the teacher evaluate his work. Sometimes if we do peer assessments, we evaluate our classmates' work. But self-assessment is something we do much less often. And yet it's a really important skill to be able to constantly self-critique your own work. And all these skills align with professional expectations, especially, for example, if you have to train managers and so on. It's extremely important to have all these skills, and in particular to know how to give good feedback and to receive feedback and so on for their teams. So that's it for the section talk on benefits and skills developed. Now we're going to look at how we can establish the key steps to create this type of evaluation. Here, I've put together a little timeline where you can see each step involved in creating a challenge. So the first step is where we start, where we begin creating the challenge. Here, I'm really talking about the process itself, not about the best practices to implement beforehand. For that, I actually refer you to the previous webinar, which covers how to prepare your students, how to communicate the rubric, or how to create the criteria grid with your peers, and so on. Here, I'm really going to talk about how to create a group member evaluation challenge using the platform, using the Challenge Me platform. So the first thing to do, obviously, is to add your activity to your course, meaning the Challenge Me activity that's available in the school's tools, as I mentioned. You can add the Challenge Me activity to your course, knowing that you can also use Challenge Me independently directly without going through your course tools if needed. That can be useful in certain cases. For example, if students have trouble accessing the school's tool, Conquer, which can happen sometimes, they can still access the platform directly. It's also useful for external instructors who can access the platform because they don't necessarily have access to the school's tools. Or sometimes it also happens that teachers simply don't use the school's tool. But since the school has a Challenge Me license, there's no problem. They can still use Challenge Me directly, as I mentioned, without necessarily going through the LMS like Moodle, Blackboard, or Brightspace. So I'm going back to the first step. We add an activity to our course. We select the group member evaluation template. So here I went over this part a bit quickly because it's obvious. We have quite a few templates, but here we're going to select the GISA group member evaluation template. You'll see later if you stay for the bonus section what exactly a template is on Challenge Me. And we're going to define the evaluation period or periods that will be set up. I said the period or periods precisely to remind you of that well-known use case where you can have several evaluation periods at different times so that members of the same group can evaluate each other at various stages of the project. Next, you will be able to directly import, or rather you will need to import or create the teams on the Challenge Me platform. So to repeat, since we've integrated with the school's tools, we automatically retrieve the groups and participants if they are already in your course. This is generally the case. In about 70% of cases, the groups are already in the course. And if you don't have them yet, Maître de nous, we encourage you to do it this way, so at least you'll have them directly. So you can retrieve the groups from your course. And if you don't have them in your course, no problem. You can also import them very easily with a simple Excel file. I also know that quite a few teachers use an Excel file to manage the groups for their courses. And so you can also import these groups directly into Challenge Me with an Excel file. There's no issue with that. Next, once we've created our activity and set up our teams, we'll be able to create a customized criteria grid directly. Now, when I say customized, you can also simply use templates that have already been created by Challenge Me for certain use cases. You can use, or rather retrieve, these templates, and you can modify or adjust them if needed, and so on. And you'll be able to define the evaluation method. So when I talk about the evaluation method, I mean how the students will be able to assess the members of their group. We have several methods. Some are more fun, so to speak, than others, like the star rating system, where they rate in the same way you would rate a restaurant, a hotel, and so on. You have the grading system, which is a bit more academic. Students simply give a score to their peers for each criterion. There are also predefined options available. So for this type of evaluation, that's actually what we recommend for evaluating group members. Predefined options work well because they remove some of the subjectivity. To explain what this evaluation method is, what the predefined options, I'll use an example of a criterion, which is the Pohn distribution of work. In fact, the student won't just give a score for the quality of, well, the distribution of work or how the student managed the distribution of work. They won't simply give a grade or stars. Instead, they'll select a value. So the values could be, does not contribute to the distribution of work, participates in a fair distribution, actively contributes to the distribution, and so on. So here, there's less room for subjectivity. You simply select a value, and that's why for this type of evaluation, we tend to recommend this kind of evaluation method, but you can choose whichever method you prefer. You can even go as far as, if you want to do a completely formative assessment, removing the grading system altogether and asking students to provide only comments, feedback for their peers. In this case, each criterion could be a sort of open-ended question, and each student would answer that question to evaluate their peer. So that's it for the criteria section, which is really the most important part. Once again, I refer you to best practices, but this is what will ensure that the assessment is as fair as possible. If you spend a bit of time on your criteria through Kami2, you'll see that the resulting evaluations are greatly improved. Next, you can choose whether or not to activate the AI module directly on Challenge Me. So what does this AI module offer? It operates at 2 stages of the evaluation process. During the evaluation, students will be able to activate this AI assistant to help them provide quality feedback, so to speak. The idea is that they should first complete their own evaluation before launching the assistant. They will complete their evaluations. Once they are done, they will click on the assistant, which will review their evaluations and offer some advice on how they should, for example, develop their feedback and so on certain criteria. It doesn't do the evaluation for them, of course, that's not the goal, but it gives them guidance on how to provide good feedback and so on. Let me give you an example. If I give a 5 out of 10 on a criterion and then write very good as a comment, well, there's a bit of a problem there, right? The assistant will notice this and say, you gave a 5 out of 10, so there are probably some things that need to be improved, and so on. So that's a rather crude example, but it's just to help you understand the idea behind this assistant. And it will also work in a second phase during the results stage. So when students can view their grades or the comments from their peers, the assistant will also provide a summary of all the evaluations received and, in a way, create an action plan with areas for improvement, strengths, weaknesses, and so on. So really, it will give them a summary of all the evaluations received. So there you go. This is something you can activate directly on your challenges. And finally, a point that is often overlooked, but which I personally find quite important, is the display of results. In fact, it's about clearly defining this in advance, and you probably need to communicate it to the students as well. What are you going to display alongside the results? You have several options. You can choose not to display anything at all. So the results will not be communicated to the students at all. The feedback will not be communicated to the students at all. It's only for you. This can be useful, for example, if you only want to detect free riders. In that case, you might decide not to display the results at all. It's for you, for the instructor. The students won't necessarily be aware. In fact, they won't be aware at all of the feedback that was given about them and so on. Conversely, you can choose to display information such as grades of feedback received and so on. You have quite detailed control over these options directly on the platform. However, we strongly recommend still communicating this information to the students so that they are aware of what will be visible at the end regarding the evaluations. Evaluations remain anonymous unless you uncheck the option. There are certain use cases where you might want the evaluations not to be anonymous, but by default, don't worry, they are anonymous. So you still need to inform them of this information, namely that the evaluations may be seen by their peers, but in an anonymous way. So those are the different key steps, let's say, in creating a challenge. Now, I'm going to show you a bit of what it looks like on Challenge Me with a screenshot of the interfaces to explain how it works. For evaluating the members of your group, the interfaces we're going to show are very simple. They will simply be, as you can see here directly, I went too far. You can see directly come to what in the top left part, the of the slide, how the interface looks, where then with the first section for self-assessment. When you click on it, below you'll see all the evaluation criteria with each criterion displayed, along with its description, its evaluation method, and so on. You'll see it's quite simple to set up, but for the student, it's very clear, quite intuitive, and easy to use. And then, to evaluate their peers, the list of classmates will be displayed directly. He will be able to click on each of his classmates to evaluate them in the same way he did his self-assessment. He can assess his peers and directly see the criteria with the rubric, which, as mentioned, is clear and very explicit. He can also benefit from the AI assistant if it has been activated, as I mentioned, before submitting his evaluation. He can click on the AI assistant button to do a quick check and make sure everything is okay. And next, the second screenshot just below shows the display of the results. And here the student will be able to view, if you have allowed it, if you have enabled these options, he will be able to see the feedback he received from his group members, the grades he received from his group members, the average grades, the grades for each criterion, and so on. The highest grade, the lowest grade he received, etc. He has a kind of small dashboard at the end, and you can really decide what you want to display or not. And I'll say it again, you can also emphasize anonymity when displaying these results. For the student, it's quite important to make them aware of this fact. That's it for the student interface section. If you really want to know more about how it works on the platform and what it will look like, I invite you to stay right after for the direct implementation of an activity. On the teacher's side, we'll take a look at some interfaces that provide much more information for the teacher, of course, with fairly detailed dashboards where all the available information is displayed, including the group average and the standard deviation within a single group. For me, the most important information during a group member evaluation is to look at the standard deviations within the group, or to see if one or more people in the group have grades that are completely different from the rest of the group members, in order to quickly identify dysfunctional groups. So you will have a direct and very quick view of this information. The data is in real time. This isn't something we necessarily communicate, but in fact, as soon as the activity starts and students begin their evaluations, you have all this data displayed in real time, and you can have fun checking it out directly as soon as the activity is launched. You don't have to wait until the end of the challenge to access all this information. You can view overall information about groups, but you can also see individual dual details about each student's or participation. Did they complete their work properly? How many evaluations have they completed so far? Did they submit any of them late or not? Are any of their submissions still in draft form? You really have a comprehensive dashboard you do for each challenge with quite detailed analysis. You can export the results in Excel format if needed, and you can also directly publish the grades if you want. For example, as I mentioned earlier, for this grade to be part of a set or a weighting for a final grade. You can also easily publish the grades for this activity directly into your gradebook right within the course. This can be done very simply with just one click. As long as the item is present in the gradebook, you can publish each student's grades individually into this gradebook. And in your course gradebook, you can apply weightings in relation to other grades that have also been entered in this gradebook. So those are the benefits of the platform. for teachers. I've pretty much covered everything. If you have any questions, feel free to turn on your microphones and ask them directly or type them in the POW chat. If you don't have any questions, we'll move on to the part about creating an activity on Challenge Me with the new interfaces. I'll give you 10 seconds if you want to ask a question. Jean, I don't know if you have anything to add or if there are any points I didn't go into detail about that you think would be relevant to mention.
No, I think it was well covered. Don't hesitate if you have any questions. What you really need to remember as well is that this type of activity, intra-group evaluation, can be used to identify free riders, but it can also be used for other use cases, such as learning to work as a team. And depending on the objectives you want to achieve with this kind of format, we can also recommend certain configurations. So don't hesitate to reach out to us for best practices or to watch the replay of the previous webinar, which is specifically about best practices.
Very well. Let's take a look directly. We'll move on to the implementation. I really encourage you to interact during the implementation of what I'm about to present to you of this challenge. As I mentioned, the interfaces I'm going to show you, if you go directly to the platform today, you won't see the same things. These are really interfaces that are still in development. They're almost finished on our end, and we're just starting to present them. So please don't hesitate. If you have any feedback on these interfaces, to share your comments with us, etc. I encourage all of you, since there aren't that many of us, to turn on your microphones if needed and comment live on what you see. Some of you can even create a challenge at the same time, and so on. So I'm going to switch over to the other interface now. We're going to look directly, we're going to move on, to the implementation. I really encourage you to discuss during the implementation of this, what I'm going to present to you of this challenge. As I was saying, the interfaces I'm going to show you, if you go directly to the platform today, you won't see the same things. These are really interfaces that are still in development. They're almost finished on our end, and we're just starting to present them. So don't hesitate if you have any feedback on these interfaces to share your comments with us, etc. So I invite all of you, there aren't that many of us anyway, I invite all of you to turn on your microphone if needed and comment live on what you see, and for some of you even create a challenge at the same time, etc. So I'm going to switch to the other interface now, because I want to show you how things look and work from a different perspective. This will help you better understand the process as I demonstrated. Please stop sharing this. It is important that you do not continue to distribute or forward this information any further. Sharing this could lead to unintended consequences, such as spreading misinformation, violating privacy, or causing confusion among others. By refraining from sharing, you are helping to ensure that sensitive or potentially misleading content does not reach more people. We appreciate your understanding and cooperation in keeping this information private and not sharing it with anyone else. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Can you all see my screen with the Challenge Me interface?
Yes.
Is everything okay? Okay. So now I'm logging in, right? I'm live on the platform. So I didn't go through Moodle or, through a school's tool, right? Directly. Here I went directly. The idea is that if you want to create an activity, you generally need to go through your school's tool on your end by adding a new activity or a new resource. So now I'm on the Challenge Me interface, and I'm going to create a new challenge here. I'm going to select my account and my course here directly. So the very first thing you notice right away, that's different compared to, I'll put this in front that way. It's clearer. There you go. The first thing you can see is that now we have templates that are displayed directly with categories that you can filter here. And the idea is that we show you the most commonly used templates, but you can also, and this is a big new feature, create your own templates. let me digress for a moment. This has nothing to do with evaluating group members. Here, it's more about the platform side of things. But there you have it. This is going to be a major new feature that's coming. You'll be able to create your own templates. So this will mainly be used by teaching teams who will create templates for their instructors. And above all, what's interesting is that it will allow you to restrict access to certain features. So instructors won't be able to modify absolutely everything. Often we want them to use a template in a very specific way. And now that's possible. Cool. We'll be able to set that up by saying, well, I don't want all the options to be available. I want the instructor to be able to launch this type of challenge, define only, and as we'll see here, the participants, the dates, and possibly the criteria, and not be able to change everything so that nothing gets broken. So you'll be able to create your own templates. But teachers themselves will also be able to create their own templates directly. So if a teacher is used to always creating the same challenge, they can create a template for themselves and launch it directly and define what they want to display when configuring their challenge so that it goes as quickly as possible. And the idea is actually to have templates that can be launched in just 3 clicks. And that's what we're going to do here. We're dealing with a fairly simple use case here, which will just involve evaluating the group members and a results phase. And we'll be able to configure that very easily. So here, I'm going to select my group member evaluation template here. And you can see that I have different options. So this is different compared to, well, for those who are used to seeing our interfaces, before you had to select each phase. And in each phase, you had to define all the options for that phase. We've completely changed the way you configure a challenge. Now we are doing something simpler, we think, because it's going to be more linear. And here, instead of configuring each phase, so historically I had to set up the evaluation of group members, the dates, the criteria, the participants, and so on. Then I would move on to the results display, where I had to configure the dates, the options, and so forth. Here now, as I was saying, we move to something more linear with, first of all, just the planning stage. So at what point this evaluation will take place. And so here I just have to click here and set the dates when I want to schedule my evaluation. I can still set up a late evaluation date. Actually, this would allow students to still complete their evaluations after the end date. We know that this happens often. There are often students who come to us saying, well, I couldn't do the evaluation for one reason or another. I still want to be able to evaluate my classmates. The teachers are fine with it. So we set up a late evaluation date to let them evaluate without disrupting the evaluation process for all the other students. You'll see that in the results phase, we can adjust certain options on Kimoku to allow for penalties for these delays and so on. So there you go. You just need to set the dates here. It's the same for the date when the results are displayed. Here, by clicking, you can set when you want to communicate the results to the students right here. I didn't mention it earlier, but there's also a whole notification system that's automatic and managed by the platform. So that can save you quite a bit of time. It spares you from having to notify students when things start, remind them just before it ends, and so on. It's the platform that takes care of everything. And you can choose which notifications you want to enable or not. Next, once we've set the dates, we'll click Next and manage the participants here. And so here, well, it's simple. For a group member evaluation, the only thing we have to do is register the participants, meaning the groups, like directly as teams, who exactly will be evaluating whom. So here I click on Register as a team. Since it's directly connected to my course, I immediately find my groups here. So here I have 3 groups of 2, 3, and 4 people. If I click on a group, I can see the composition of that group right here. And here I will select the groups that will need to participate in this group member evaluation. So here I'm going to select my 3 groups. Here I'll add them. And I immediately end up with my 3 groups. If I need to make changes to the groups, even during the evaluation, that's completely possible. Let's imagine that Miriam ends up in another group. I can move her, transfer her to team 1, for example. There you go. She's automatically added. Or let's say this test student is no longer part of the group and shouldn't participate in the evaluation. I can simply unenroll them with a single click here, just like that. So even though you've already set up your groups, if there are any changes, you absolutely have the option to make modifications and adjust your groups directly on Formda, the platform. Now, once I've managed my groups, I can move on to the evaluation criteria here. At the moment, I haven't defined any criteria for this evaluation phase, and I'll be able to add either a new criterion. So here I'm going to add it from scratch, and I'll give it a name. I'll have the option to allow, or rather to let students give feedback or not on this criterion to make it mandatory, to choose the evaluation method, which I mentioned earlier. So the star rating system, the numerical system that really corresponds to a grade, predefined options, checkboxes, or a text field, which is more suited to an open-ended question, allowing the student to leave a comment that way. So there you have it. I'll be able to set all of that up. The description of the criterion is the important part. Actually, we really encourage you to describe the evaluation criteria as clearly as possible to ensure fairer assessments. You also have the option to choose from a database of criteria, specifically the Challenge Me database. So if I click here, there are only a few because we're on our test platform, but of course we have many more in production. I think we have about 100 criteria or so. So you can browse the criteria we offer and select them directly, which helps you avoid reinventing the wheel and lets you pick straight from our database. But you also have the option to add a collection of criteria. So what is a collection of criteria? It's a set of criteria that we've already defined, which are specifically designed to address certain use cases. So here, for the purpose of this demo, I've created a collection focused on developing soft skills, and inside it, I already have 4 criteria. So these collections were all actually created by Challenge Me. There are, I believe, about 15 of them on the platform, each specifically designed to address certain use cases. And so when you select one, but here, I'll select Develop Soft Skills. This collection already contains 4 criteria, the following 4 criteria. And when I select it, my collection is immediately added here with the 4 criteria that I have defined. So here it is. With the evaluation method, a predefined option where students, as I mentioned earlier regarding the distribution of work, will have to assess the members of their group by selecting one of the values indicated here, and will have to evaluate leadership by selecting one of the values indicated here. They can also leave a comment and so on. But if you add a collection and you don't like a particular criterion, you have the option to delete it. That's not a problem. They are not linked to each other. And if you want to adjust the description or the value of a criterion, you can also modify it right here, rename it if needed, or require students to leave mandatory feedback on this criterion. You also have the option to display these predefined choices, which by default always go from the lowest option to the best option. You have the option to display them in a random order. So we recommend this if you really want them to work on the evaluation. Take the time to assess themselves properly, provide a very specific comment, and make sure they carefully read all the options. This helps keep their attention just more and prevent students from just clicking on the highest scores out of essay without actually reviewing all the criteria. So it can be useful. Some teachers have encountered this issue of overgrading, let's say where students were doing the work somewhat automatically. And they implemented this option, and saw that the evaluations became much fairer afterwards because students paid more attention to what they were reading and realized that just clicking on the last option didn't work since it resulted in completely inconsistent grades. So that's it for the criterion. editing section. So as you can see, you can define all your criteria this way. There is quite detailed management of these criteria. You can pretty much do whatever you want, and we can adapt them any type of rubric normally with the different formats, etc., and options that we have here. To finish, you have the option to leave a comment, in other words, to enable or disable the overall comment, and to make it mandatory or not. I'm going to move on to the options section. So in this type of evaluation, there is no stage that requires setting any options. The AI assistant, which I mentioned earlier, can be enabled here to provide a summary for writing assistance. So this allows students to have a bit of help after they've completed their evaluations. They can click and get a brief report of their evaluations, which helps them improve their feedback or support certain points in their feedback. And the summary will allow students to synthesize all the evaluations they've received, giving them a brief recap with suggested improvements and so on. There we go. I'm going to move this over. And finally, that's it. You can complete to finish, you can actually validate this challenge. There are several options. You can either publish it directly, or you can preview it or force you from the student's perspective to see how the challenge will appear. But you always have the option. So here, in fact, all the options offered are in a restricted mode. We don't have access to all the options available on Challenge Me. But if needed, you can absolutely click here on Advanced Settings. I'll do it directly, and you can see that there are more steps or more options at each stage. Now I can add phases here directly. I can manage instructions in the options. So I have quite a few options here that are displayed for showing the results, which I mentioned earlier. You can hide the participant's result, display the score and the average by criterion, and so on. So there are a lot more options. But the idea is that for models where you really define what you want to display directly in the challenge configuration, it should be as simple as possible. I'll quickly move on to the preview here. So you have a tab where you can directly see how the challenge will look once you've configured it. You can select a participant, a date. So here, the evaluation will take place from May 14th to May 20th. So I'm going to set it within those dates. For example, if I set it to May 19th, I can see that in my task progress as Florent Bézières, I would be able to evaluate the members of my group. And if I click here, I see that I need to evaluate Cyril and Miriam. And I also need to do my self-evaluation based on the criteria that have been defined here directly, where we find the 4 criteria I added to my challenge, as well as the comment I can leave right here at the end like this. So that's for my self-evaluation, but it will work the same way for the 2 other members of my group. And here you have an entire tab that will allow you to track the activity. This is what I was talking about earlier. Here you really have the dashboard for your challenge, where you can see participation, grades, averages, standard deviations, and so on for each of your groups and your students. There you go. I've pretty much covered everything. Do you have any questions about these interfaces, or is everything pretty clear for you? For those who may have already used the platform, feel free to let me know what you think about this step-by-step system here, which will somewhat change the way we create a challenge. All right, the floor is yours. I don't know if there have been any messages in the chat, Jean. I think you replied to the message.
No, there haven't been any particular messages.
Okay, sounds good. Well then, if there are no questions, I'll wish you a good afternoon, a nice end of the day. Have a great end of the week, everyone. See you very soon.
Thank you very much. It was very clear.
Goodbye.
Thank you. See you soon.
Have a good day.
Goodbye.